Let's discuss the political section of Australia. Australia has a Westminster system of government. The country falls under the realm of Queen Elizabeth II, who resides in the UK. She is represented by the Governor-General in Australia, currently Peter Cosgrove, who was appointed in 2013. Australia is governed by a Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, who was elected in 2015. Australia is a federation of 6 states, each of which has their own governor that falls under the Prime Minister. There are several key differences between the Australian government and the United States government. The most notable difference is that the United States is run by a president, while Australia is run by a prime minister who is appointed by the Queen. The cabinet is appointed by the president in the U.S., while the cabinet is made up of members of the House in Australia. Also, the United States has fixed election dates, while Australia's elections can happen at any time. Australia's rule of law scores and Transparency International CPI indexes are about the same as the United States. In 2015, Australia scored a 79, while the United States was a 76. Freedom from corruption is currently at an 80. The United States' freedom from corruption score is only slightly lower than Australia, and they have been relatively the same for the past 9 years, varying from 60 to 70%. Australia has also been relatively the same, varying from 80 to 90%, with only a slight dip between 2014 and 2015.
Now let's spend some time talking about the economy of Australia. The Australian economy is a mixed economy with only a few government-owned enterprises, mostly in the national infrastructure and defense sectors. Governments in each state and territory in Australia also have some state-run enterprises, but their scopes are limited to what most would consider public works, such as land management, water, power, and other infrastructure utilities. Australia's GDP is roughly 8.3% of the United States GDP. While Australia's GDP has had steady growth over the past 10 years with the exceptions of 2009 and 2014 due to global economic slowdowns, the United States has seen growth rates almost 3 times as high. Expectations are for the Australian GDP to reach $1.759 trillion by 2020, more than doubling their 2006 numbers. Growth rates are also expected to hold steady around the 0.8% mark over the next 4 years. Much of the growth can be attributed to the growing economies that Australia does business with in the Asia-Pacific region. The gross national income per capita at PPP in Australia is currently $42,760. This measure has been on a gradual incline and not far behind that of the United States. It is also far higher than the global average, making Australia a high-income country. The official currency of Australia is the Australian dollar. The current exchange rate is 1.3 Australian dollars for $1 US. There has been a lot of movement in the exchange rates over the last 15 years with the weakening of the US dollar and China finally allowing the market more control over the yen. The United Nations ranks Australia second with a score of 0.935 on their 2015 Human Development Index. When compared to the United States, Australia scores higher in every category except GNI per capita. Strong fiscal and social policy over the last 30 years has led to a steady increase in key components such as life expectancy, education, and GNI per capita. Australia's unemployment rate has held steady at the 5 to 6% range over the last 15 years. They have experienced 2 periods of high unemployment numbers over the last 50 years. Poor government economic policy was found to be the blame for both of these instances of high unemployment as the government failed to act quickly enough to the global economic events. Since the year 2000, steady economic growth has helped stabilize the unemployment rates throughout the country. Australia was not affected near to the extent the United States was by the financial crisis in the late 2000s. The World Economic Forum ranks Australia 21st on their Global Competitive Index with a score of 5.1, compared to the United States score of 5.6. The indexes show Australia's strongest areas have been in the financial market development and higher education. Despite this, Australia is falling behind in market efficiencies, business sophistication, and innovation. The Heritage Foundation also ranks Australia extremely high on their Economic Freedom Index with a score of 80.3. This puts Australia 5th on the list of countries. They rank highest in the areas of property rights, trade, investment and financial freedoms, regulatory efficiency, and freedom from corruption. Areas of concern are with the government spending and fiscal policy. It is worth noting, however, that many of the major trading partners in neighboring countries in the Asia-Pacific region rank much lower than Australia. Some of these nations are trending in the right direction, but not nearly as quickly as many would like to see. Australia currently ranks 14th in global FDI inward stock with 592 billion US and 18th in global FDI outward stock with 471 billion US. While these numbers may be small compared to the almost 5 trillion US and 6.3 trillion US of inward and outward stock into and out of the United States, they still show the growing support for doing business in Australia with its close proximity to the growing markets in the Asia-Pacific region, the country's economically friendly business environment, and their participation in numerous trade unions. Australia is a member of several free trade agreements as well as a member of the World Trade Organization. Their commitment to free trade was made all the more clear with the recent signing of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP for short. This agreement will help lower trade barriers among all member states and raise the standard of living with increased measures in labor safety, health, and wage practices across those less developed nations. Australia's imports were estimated to be 208.4 billion US in 2015, down from an estimated 240.5 billion US in 2014. Their top three import partners were China, the United States, and Japan. Australia's exports were estimated to be 184.4 billion US in 2015, down from an estimated 240.8 billion US in 2014. With an abundance of natural resources, it is no surprise that crude oil, ores, slag, and ash account for 50% of exports. However, with more attention being paid to the environmental impact of such items, caution should be heeded in the coming years as these exports could drastically decline. The economic slowdown in China has been seen as the cause for the sluggish export numbers. Looking at the top export partners for Australia, we once again find China at number 1, with Japan, South Korea, and the United States close behind.
Now, let's discuss the sociocultural section of Australia. Australia has many religions, with Catholic being the most prominent. Approximately 23% of Australians report having no religion, and approximately 18% are Anglican, which is traditional with the Church of England. Australia has a very diverse set of ethnic groups in the country. English make up 25.9% of the people, while Australians make up 25.4%. Aboriginal Australians make up 15.8% of the population. With that being said, English is the most spoken language in the country of Australia. However, there are several other languages that are spoken in different sections of the country. Different territories within Australia have their own languages as well. Other Australian Indigenous languages make up 18%. The Arnhem Land and Daly River region languages make up 18% as well, while the Western Desert language makes up 14%. Hofstede measures for Australia are relatively the same as in the United States. When operating business in Australia, one can expect it to be very similar to operating business in the United States. The Trump and R's measures for Australia are also very similar to the United States, with the exception of neutral versus effective. Australia has a slightly higher score in this area than the United States, meaning you can expect more expressiveness and gesturing when doing business transactions with Australia.
We will now discuss technology as it relates to Australia. One of the leading technological indicators looks at the percentage of GDP that is spent on research and development. Money invested in this sector can increase innovation and create new goods or services that can have a positive impact on the economy. As indicated by the graph, the United States year over year in the past decade has spent significantly more on research and development. The last recorded data in the World Bank for Australia indicates that spending on research and development has seen a slight decline. When looking at technology, it is also important to consider the Network Readiness Index. This report looks at everything from the political factors to individual factors such as mobile usage, internet usage, and social media usage that affects overall network readiness. Australia ranks number 16 in the world in the 2015 report with an overall score of 5.5. From the data, we can see that Australia has made the most significant gains year over year in the individual usage composite of the index. This shows that there has been an increase in mobile devices, internet usage, and computers in the homes of the population. The United States' overall number is only slightly higher than Australia at 5.6. However, this slight advantage also catapults the U.S. into the 7th overall score. The United States has significant advantages in business usage and economic impact and has continued to see gains in these two areas year over year. We will continue our discussion on Australia by looking at the environment. The mainland and Tasmania are surrounded by many thousands of small islands and numerous larger ones. As an island nation, coastlines play an important role in defining national, state, and territory boundaries. Seated in the southern eastern hemisphere, its location allows for it to have optimal entry into the Asian countries like China and Japan. Climatic zones range from tropical rainforests, deserts, and cool temperature forests to snow-covered mountains. The uniqueness of much of Australia's flora and fauna is partly due to these features of its climate. The variability has also left the Australian environment susceptible to climate change effects. The Yale Environmental Protection Indicators rank Australia at 13th in the world, with it scoring highest at number 1 in health impacts and water and sanitation. Over the 10-year period, the most notable decline is in the fisheries, as they have been subject to adverse effects from climate change over the last decade. The United States, in comparison, ranks 26 overall and is considerably lower than Australia in most categories. How then does Australia achieve such high rankings with respect to the environment? A stringent set of environmental regulations is in place to ensure that environmental quality is maintained. However, these regulations can be intimidating to businesses and can oftentimes result in a significant amount of red tape to begin operations. The Australian government recognized this, and as a response, created the One Stop Shop in 2014. The One Stop Shop resulted in streamlined decision-making on projects and lower costs for businesses while maintaining high environmental standards. Administrative costs are estimated to be saved at about $9 million, and delay costs for businesses under the One Stop Shop are estimated at a $417 million savings. Our last major topic for discussion is the legal system of Australia. Similar to the United States, Australia is based on a common law system. A common law system is based on the doctrine of judicial precedent, the principle under which lower courts must follow the decisions of higher courts rather than on statutory laws. The courts are divided into federal and state courts. The Australian court hierarchy consists of a variety of courts and tribunals at both the federal and state and territory levels, with the High Court being the highest court in the Australian judicial system. Unlike the United States Supreme Court, the High Court of Australia, which was established in 1903, has general appellate jurisdiction over the state Supreme Courts. This ensures that there is a single, uniform Australian common law. We will conclude our discussion on Australia by looking at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to the country. Strengths include a well-established legal and political system, geographical and natural resources native to the land, and an ongoing reform agenda to remain competitive in the global market. Weaknesses include failure to capitalize on technology developed in the country, and it's often lost overseas, a high amount of external debt, and weakening growth and productivity. Some opportunities for Australia include global structural change and emerging markets with Asia, sustainability of the current tax system, increase efficiency through the use of technology and ICT development. Some threats to Australia include climate change, declining in mining contribution to GDP, external threats from declining nations, and scarcity of natural resources.
On behalf of Team 9, I would like to thank you for watching our video today. We hope you learned all you need to know about visiting Australia and potentially opening business. Thank you.